I just want to start by saying that these slides are available for anybody who's interested. I've got the link up on the screen right now. It's just bit.ly/6HIPAA. And I'll put this up at the end of the presentation as well, so you can grab it if you'd like. A little bit about me. As Frank mentioned, my name is Rob Sobers. I've been at Varonis since 2011, and I'm director of marketing, but I also am an engineer at heart. I've been an engineer since I was probably 16 years old, hacking into systems and always interested in information security. I've been a software developer for most of my career, and then I came over to the dark side. I'm on Twitter at rsobers. I mainly talk about tech stuff, some marketing stuff, and Game of Thrones as well. So if you're a fan of that, follow me. And then, of course, blog.varonis.com. I want to point it out because it's a fantastic resource for IT education. We post a lot of things on healthcare compliance, other compliance regulations, information security, malware prevention, etc. And we keep it really educational. We don't bombard you with any kind of marketing stuff on our blog. It's really a good resource for IT people that just want to learn more. And so just a little bit of background about what Varonis is, in case you're not familiar with who we are or what we do. We started in 2005 as customers, and we went public last year on NASDAQ. Our main goal is that we secure your information from the inside out. So we take an approach of security, information security, that starts with the data. Rather than looking at a perimeter, we look at data that's important. In the case of HIPAA, it's healthcare data, protected health information. We want to figure out where it is, who's got access to it, ensure that only the right people have access to it, and then monitor its use so that you can be sure that your compliance policies are actually working, and you can prove that to an auditor. I do want to mention how we got started as a company, because I do think it's relevant to this presentation. Our co-founders, Yaki Feidelson and Ohad Korkis, were working at NetApp, and they were both storage consultants, and they were working on a project in Angola, which is on the western coast of Africa. And part of that project was to deploy submarines with deep sea divers out into the middle of the ocean, and they were going to dive out and take these really high resolution photos of the ocean floor. I think it was for some sort of drilling expedition. But they were storing these photos on their NetApp NAS devices, right? So lots of folders with sensitive, very expensive content just sort of sitting there. And then one day they were gone. All of the photos, these $1 million plus photos, were just missing. And so the leader of the project looked to Yaki and Ohad and said, "You guys are the geniuses. Tell us what happened. Who had access? What does the log say? Tell us what happened. Were we hacked?" And they just sort of had to throw their hands up and say, "We don't know. We don't have, the platform doesn't have that sort of auditing and detection." And then they looked at each other and said, "Wow, this is a huge business." Because there's too many companies out there and organizations out there that have sensitive information that they have zero visibility on. And so that's how Varonis got started. All right, so the agenda at hand. We're going to go over why we care about HIPAA. I'm going to introduce the anatomy of HIPAA for anybody who might be a novice in this area. You know, it's quite a lengthy bit of legislation, so for anybody who's not familiar, we'll cover it. As well as some of the recent changes dating back to, I think, 2013 at this point. And then we'll go over why you need to comply, what would happen if you don't, you know, in some case studies. And then I'll go over some quick tips on how to shore up your HIPAA compliance. And then, of course, at the very end, we will do a Q&A. Just a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, nor do I play one on the internet. So please consult your legal professional with any advice that I give here. I'm just really trying to give everybody a good high-level understanding of the state of HIPAA compliance and some technical safeguards you could put in place to protect yourself against a breach and to comply with HIPAA. All right, just starting off, why do we care? There's some very obvious reasons. We don't want to get dinged on an audit, but in the case of a breach, we don't want to suffer fines and penalties. We don't want to damage the reputation of our business, but we also don't want to harm, presumably we don't want to harm the people that are involved. Because with healthcare information, unlike maybe credit card information or other data that's been leaked, this is really personal. You know, there's certain um, data that healthcare providers have to have, and they need it to provide quality care. But it's just so sensitive, and in the event of a breach, it can really do damage to the people involved. So just a little bit of a state of the audit. So what is the OCR, the Office of Civil Rights? What are they talking about when it comes to audits? So in 2012, they did a preliminary round of HIPAA audits, and they found that more than 2/3 of those audited had technical shortfalls. So they were supposed to ramp up their auditing program in the 2014-2015 range, and it got delayed. So we bought ourselves some time. But then in September, just a couple months ago, they said, hey, we're getting our stuff together, we're coming. And what that means is they're going to start doing an increasing number of what they call desk audits, which is basically checking to see whether you got your administrative ducks in a row. Are you documenting your technology safeguard, your technical safeguards? Are you documenting the policies you're putting in place to meet the HIPAA requirements? So that's important to have. You should be documenting everything, as we'll cover in just a bit. And then they're ramping up site visits where they actually come on site and audit you, and they want to see evidence of HIPAA in action, as they put it. They want to actually test your systems and verify that the policies that you've documented are in place, and the safeguards you put on paper are actually working in the real world. And during the pilot program, they contracted a lot of this auditing out to KPMG, and now they're contracting it through a company called FCI Federal. Not sure how much that matters, but I think they're trying to keep the overhead on the OCR low in doing this. And then another thing they put in the announcement in September was that they're redesigning their website, which I guess good for them, right? I'm not sure how that impacts us, though they do have their wall of shame in case you get breached. Those breaches are made public on their website. Just a quick look at 2015. One of my colleagues, Andy Green, who does a lot of great research and writing on our blog, made this little visualization to kind of plot out healthcare data breaches over the years since 2009, and you can access this at the bit.ly link at the bottom. It's bit.ly/breachy, and you can play around with it. You can drag and drop and kind of slice and dice the data. But really, what I want to point out here is that in 2015 we had some kind of, as Andy would call it, home run breaches with one single provider losing up to 80 million records. And so the breaches are getting bigger and nastier. He's got some data in there about like the type of loss, whether it's theft or phishing or lost laptop, stuff like that. So it's really interesting to take a look at. But the conclusion I draw is that things are kind of getting worse and worse as connectivity increases and the demand for productivity increases. Yet we still have security kind of pulling up direction. All right, so what is HIPAA? What does it stand for? It stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996. And the reason it has that name is because the original goal was not to really direct any kind of security initiatives. It was really aimed at making it simple to transmit information electronically. As the internet kind of came about, I believe it was the Clinton administration that said, well, if we're going to be starting to do this stuff like digitally, everyone's got to get on the same page. We need to standardize and make it efficient so that we're not like, this healthcare provider and this insurance company, they all use this data format and the other ones use the other data format. They wanted to make some sort of standard. But as things ramped up and everything started to move online, they said, well, we better start thinking about security as well, right? So that's really what took over. And so HIPAA is really made up of 5 separate rules. We're only going to cover one in this presentation, which is the security rule, because that's really what people in the IT department care about and really need to be accountable to. But I'll just give you a quick overview of them on this slide here. So number 1 is the privacy rule. And this really is laying the groundwork for what should be protected and why. So it's kind of like establishing the rules of the road. You should go, you should go this many miles per hour, etc. In the world of healthcare, it's like this is the type of information you need to keep private. These are the policies you need to have in place, such as nurses are allowed to access patients' information from locations, etc., kind of laying the groundwork. And then the security rule is sort of following up and making sure that you have technical safeguards and physical safeguards around those policies so that you can ensure that the privacy actually is preserved. And then you have the breach notification rule, which is sort of self-explanatory. This is explaining what you have to do in the event of a breach. Do you have to report it? How many days do you have to report it? Who do you have to report it to, etc. You can read here on the slide, if your breach involves more than 500 people, it must be reported within 60 days. And if it's more than 500 people, they publish it on their website. But it's important to note that state laws have now kind of come in and superseded this federal regulation. So in California's case, you only have 5 days to report a breach. And there's also some bonus PHI, protected health information, that you need to be accountable for protecting in California. So it's a really kind of crazy requirement now that you have to pay attention to all of the individual state laws. And if you're in, let's say, Portland or something, you have an office there, and you have patients who live in California, you are subject for those California patients to the California rules. So it goes based on the patient's residence, not necessarily where you operate, which makes it even more complicated. The enforcement rule is basically if you don't comply, we'll fine you. And then the administrative simplification rule, this is the boring stuff. This is the one that HIPAA was created for, which says everyone must standardize their transactions to make everything run smoothly. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty and talk about the security rule. And the first step, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what actually needs to be protected? What does HIPAA tell us we need to protect? And to use an analogy from my childhood, if HIPAA compliance were a video game, e-PHI would be the princess in the Super Mario Brothers game. So we have to protect the e-PHI, the electronic protected healthcare information, at all costs. So what is e-PHI? Well, HIPAA doesn't explicitly define that, other than to say it's information that can reasonably be linked to an individual, which, people in IT, us technical people, we want to know specifics. Tell us exactly what we need to do and we'll do it. Well, this is very vague, right? It's just anything that can be reasonably linked back is considered e-PHI. All right, not a lot to work with. And so HIPAA introduced something called the safe harbor, which attempts to make this a little bit more crispy, a little bit more detailed. And so they give us these 18 forms of e-PHI that said that we absolutely must protect. So if we have this information about somebody, it's considered e-PHI and it must be protected under HIPAA. So you got all these sort of standard things, like you don't want to, leak somebody's birthday and their name and, email address, social security number, etc. But if you notice at the very bottom, the very last one on this list is any other unique ID. So that kind of is like a catch-all for them, saying like, hey, if we didn't account for anything, but you still violated somebody's privacy because you leaked something else that really could identify them, that counts too. So basically, you can't really rest on your laurels and say, okay, I've got all these 18 things covered, and so we're good to go. And the safe harbor was really designed to give guidance for those that were attempting to de-identify health information. There's some really good use cases for analyzing healthcare information that's covered under HIPAA. And in order to do so, you might want to de-identify it, so anonymize it all so that it can't be traced back to a person, but you can still do a study on, like how many children in a certain area might suffer from autism or something like that, but removing all of the identifiers. And so they said under the safe harbor, if you remove all of these things, you can do that stuff. So But as I mentioned before, there's that catch-all in there, so we really have to be careful. And if you are going to be de-identifying information for whatever purpose, word of caution, just be careful, because things that you think may not be identifiable anymore might be. So just a quick example, there's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, and she was able to identify 87% of the people in the United States using just their zip code, gender, and date of birth. And this sort of blew my mind when I first saw it. I'm like, are you kidding me? You know, if I got a spreadsheet that had 3 columns, just zip code, gender, and date of birth, I would think there's no way you're going to actually identify the person that belongs to that each individual row. As I thought about it a little bit further and thought about my own zip code and, you know, how many males in my zip code had my exact birth date, you know, it starts to become a little bit more obvious. But people sort of copying production systems into a dev environment, I've seen that bite people left and right. There was a recent breach, not in the healthcare arena, where that exact thing happened. Somebody copied the production data onto a dev server that was completely unmonitored and unprotected, and it resulted in a major breach for that company. Okay, so under the security rule, they outline a process. And basically the process, which I think is a very good one, goes like this. It starts at the top, and it says, first thing you do is assess your risk. So you make a judgment call based on the sensitivity of the system or the data storage or whatever you're evaluating, you know, your data storage and protection as a whole. And then you develop a plan based on the security rule recommendations. So if you're assessing the risk of your Active Directory, then you look at the security rule and you look at any of the guidance that talks about identities and identity management, and you develop a plan. And hopefully you not only do what the security rule outlines, but you go a little bit further than that to try and make it extra secure. Then you implement your solutions, you document your decisions in case you get caught with one of those desk checks. You have documents specifying exactly what you've implemented and when and why. And then you have a process in place where you do this, you know, you do a check-in periodically. Did we add any new systems? Did the documentation need to be updated? Do new solutions we have need to be deployed to new areas of the company, etc. And this is going to keep you safe in the audit process. All right, so what is needed to be compliant with the security rule? They say you have to maintain reasonable and appropriate physical, administrative, and technical safeguards to make sure that everyone's information is kept private. And so I recommend that you read the standards. They put out some charts. It's on the Health and Human Services website that outline each of these safeguards, and it's really easy to read. And it's important that they're technology neutral. They don't tell you, oh, you must use, you know, this form of encryption or this type of firewall, because they intentionally did that because they know technology evolves and they don't want to have to keep going back and revising these rules. So they make them as generic as possible, which again, you know, in our technical nature, we want to be told exactly what to do so we can do it and make sure that we're meeting code, but it's not quite that easy, unfortunately. And so just to clarify what they mean by administrative, basically this is you know, things like security training and things not necessarily of a technical implementation nature, but assigning responsibility. So it's going to be George who does our risk assessment every quarter. It's going to be, you know, Sally who does the security training each month, or whatever the case may be, or the new employee security training. So those are the safeguards that are administrative. And then you've got physical ones like, you know, what are our IDs? What's our ID procedure when entering the building, locking server rooms, securing backup tapes, demolishing, deleting data, and stuff like that. And then technical, which is, you know, what we're more kind of accustomed to, which is like our authentication strategy. Do we require two-factor authentication? Do we have any monitoring and auditing in place? Who's doing like data ownership identification and how? How are we classifying information and all of that stuff? And this is what it looks like on their website, these charts. So on the left-hand side, they'll tell you what the standard is. These are all technical safeguards here. They'll tell you which section of HIPAA it applies to, and then it gives you the recommendation, or rather the specification. And in the very far right-hand column, they've got either an R or an A. Basically the A means addressable, which doesn't mean optional. R means required, but A means addressable, which means essentially if you have to assess the specific situation and then make a judgment call as to whether or not to implement that. So automatic log off is addressable. So you have to look at the system and say, well, is the risk such that automatic log off would make sense here? And then if so, you should address it. If not, then you don't have to implement that. And here's the big kind of caveat to all of this stuff that I'm talking about today. If you make an assessment and it's fine, and the auditor says, you know what, I agree with you, this is an addressable concern, you're not getting dinged on this audit, have a nice day. And then the very next day, something happens and a breach occurs due to that, it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter that you passed your audit and you didn't get fined. A breach is a breach is a breach. So it's like, yes, we want to prepare in the way that the HIPAA legislation wants us to, but we have to go further and further because the bigger deal, in my opinion, is actually getting breached. So just a little bit of guidance there. All right, so now we're going to look at some related laws. HITECH is a modification, sort of an addition to HIPAA, which was enacted in 2009. Basically, they said, we have HIPAA, but still too many breaches are happening, so let's give it more teeth with HITECH. And HITECH expanded the privacy and security rules, and then later in 2013, they had this new thing called the Omnibus Rule, which was really to make all of the stuff, all of the promise of HITECH and the additional teeth real. And what I mean by that is they expanded the reach, meaning that more people have to comply. They made the penalties stiffer, up to $100 per violation. They said that now the standard is that a breach is considered anything that gets compromised. Like, you don't have to prove that people were harmed as a result of the breach, where in previous cases that was the case. And then they gave the patients more rights. Things not necessarily related to protection, but things like they can't sell your information to a marketing company. You have the right to request all of your recs electronically, and they have to give them to you, stuff like that. And so in terms of who must comply, before the omnibus, it was really healthcare providers, healthcare plans, clearinghouses, and then any business associates. So anybody who they worked with receives or transmits or in some way touches that protected health information on the covered entity's behalf. And they had to have an agreement in place. Now, in a post-omnibus world, any company that holds protected health information is treated just like a hospital or HMO. So if you're a cloud provider, if you're an accounting software, if you're something that's going to be housing PHI, whether you're a healthcare provider or not, HIPAA now directly applies to you. So you'll notice that Amazon Web Services and Google's cloud platform, they all have these like HIPAA compliance disclaimers and telling you exactly what they do, and they make sure that they're in compliance, or at least they should. And if you are a business associate and not a covered entity in the traditional sense, your agreement will no longer sort of release you from liability in the eyes of the OCR. So does HIPAA have teeth? What happens if you actually do suffer a breach or get dinged on an audit? I mentioned the penalties. The civil penalties can reach up to 50,000 per violation with a cap of 1.5 million. And then criminal penalties can include fines and up to 5 years in prison. And there is a case in California where it was a doctor who I think he got fired. Yeah, he got dismissed from his job and stole a bunch of like celebrity medical records, including Tom Hanks and stuff like that. And so this was a blatant case of data theft. So it was a breach, and it was also a big violation. on the doctor's behalf in terms of just straight up stealing, and he got 4 months in federal prison for that. And then just a couple of other examples. I'm sure there are many more now since I last updated this slide, but a couple of instances of healthcare providers kind of hitting the cap on the maximum penalty here. All right, now we're going to kind of go through 6 steps towards HIPAA compliance. So here's 6 things you can do. It's not a comprehensive list of actions that you must take to be HIPAA compliant, but 6 things that you should be thinking about and perhaps even implementing sooner rather than later. So number 1 is to be smart about authentication. I think one of the easiest things you can do is implement 2-factor authentication to really kind of skyrocket and increase the likelihood of preventing a data breach. If you think about, you look at any of the studies from Verizon or any of these people who do data breach studies, the amount of phishing attacks where somebody just sort of socially engineers a password out of an employee of the company and then hops on the network and moves around undetected, it's just growing and growing. So implementing 2-factor authentication can really put a strong barrier in front of that, because then not only would they have to have the password, they have to have some other factor as well, like a cell phone or in the case of biometrics, the person's fingerprint. In addition to that, there's even simpler things you can do, like just requiring strong passwords, through your Active Directory or whatever your authentication system is, expiring passwords. And then HIPAA actually says you have to have 1 unique ID per user, no shared logins. So what they want is, if somebody is accessing sensitive information, you want to be able to tie it back to who did it, right? You don't want to have these shared logins where it's like, oh, it could be Bill who did it, it could be Jane who did it, depends on who was logged in at the time. I don't know whose shift it was or whatever the case may be. You have to have unique IDs per user. So if you share a computer, you don't want to just share a login, you want to have them log out and log back in as their own user ID. Number 2 is, this is probably, in addition to authentication, this is a huge one that many companies are far behind on, which is data classification, just understanding where your e-PHI lives, right? Many people have sort of healthcare systems and databases, and they assume that the healthcare information stays cooped up in that database, and so they'll secure it, they think it's secure, etc., but they don't realize that the database is being backed up and dumped to a file system on a nightly basis, or the application that is the front end for that database has an export to Excel feature, and this information, these records are ending up in unstructured data, whether it's an email, a spreadsheet, a document, an image, a video, anything. It could be floating around your file systems, and you would have no idea unless you were periodically scanning that storage and classifying the information there. So looking for key strings like patient IDs and birthdays and stuff like that. And in our specific solution, we have something called the Varonis data classification framework, and you can plug in your own regular expressions, and we also have huge libraries of regular expressions, which are essentially these patterns that these strings that match patterns that are common identifiers and stuff like that, things like social security numbers for various different countries. If you were doing PCI compliance, there's a whole bunch of credit card stuff, and then of course you can customize your own patient IDs and stuff like that. So what this will do is you define these regular expressions, you activate them, and then the Varonis data classification framework will go out to your file systems, your SharePoint sites, etc., and scan inside files and let you know exactly where that healthcare information lives. And then it also gives you the context around who's got access to it and who is accessing it through an audit trail that we collect. So unlike many classification solutions, which basically says like, hey, you've got 20,000 healthcare records in this folder, and then that's the end of the story, we go on and tell you, and guess what? Everyone in the company can access it, and guess what? Everybody in the company is accessing it. So we have additional context around what's going on with that data, not just telling you where it lives. There are dictionaries built in, so you can have You can load in your own dictionaries or use one of our built-in ones. We've got medical glossaries, all sorts of stuff to make the data discovery process very easy. And in fact, not too long ago, I think a year ago, we implemented these compliance packs, we call them. Essentially, you say, I need to be compliant with HIPAA, and you press a button, and all of the different regular expressions and patterns that we have built in that apply to that regulation get activated for you. So you don't even have to really think about it, besides anything custom that you have that's unique to your business. All the standard stuff will get taken care of. And you can even set up a rule that says, if you find protected healthcare information in a folder that happens to be open to everyone in the company, immediately migrate it out to a safe quarantine folder, and then send an alert to the IT admins to tell them, hey, somebody accidentally copy and pasted healthcare records here, and then you can figure out what happened, look at the audit trail, figure out who did it, when they did it, where they did it from, and then adjust your policy accordingly, rather than risk it living there forever until a hacker finds it. All right, number 3 is to strive for least privilege. So after you understand where that e-PHI lives, periodically creating permissions reports and have data owners review them regularly, do something called an entitlement review, is super important. Auditors love this. They love to see that you're actually reviewing access on a periodic basis, whether it's once a month or once a quarter. Just the fact that you say, okay, we're doing this identification process to locate the sensitive information, and then we mandatorily make our department heads look at a list of people who have access and then sign off and say, yeah, this person does still need access to sensitive information. They still work in this department, etc. And you can automate this stuff. So we have a product called Data Privilege, which makes this really easy. And the data owner gets an email saying, hey, it's time for your review. And they click on a button, they click on a link in the email. It opens up a web page, shows them who has access right now, and lets them click a button that says this person should or shouldn't have access anymore. And it also gives you the ability to institute a process, a workflow for granting and revoking access, so that IT doesn't have to be sort of a middleman where, you know, somebody is a new employee, they call the help desk and say, hey, I need information to these patients' records. Chances are the person in IT has no idea whether that's a valid request or not. So with data privilege, that request would get routed automatically to the department head or somebody with business context, and then they can make the approval process. All right, number 4 is to actually audit access to data. So having an audit trail, an actual like real-time log of every time somebody touches sensitive information on every platform where it exists, whether it be in SharePoint or an email and Microsoft Exchange, Office 365, you know, wherever your sensitive data lives, having an audit trail that you can actually use and for investigative purposes or for alerting purposes is absolutely vital. And there's a couple of different sections, and you can see by the blue ribbon here on the slide, that stipulate that you have to know. You have to actually be able to validate that only the right people are touching this data. So audit trails are super important. Restricting transmission of e-PHI, this is another thing that HIPAA requires. So monitoring your email system to make sure there's nothing sensitive outflowing through email is super important. And having some sort of other method of file sharing that uses an encrypted channel, so an SSL encrypted channel. So Data Anywhere, which is a Varonis product, is a great solution to this, where you can share information between hospitals, let's say, through private links that are encrypted and also pin coded, so that so you're not just attaching a patient's MRI to an email and sending it that way, which will be not necessarily secure enough for HIPAA's liking. Many people will ask, do I need to encrypt data at rest? The answer is no, according to HIPAA. They say that only if your risk analysis deems it would be necessary should you do that. But remember, if you lose a drive and it's not encrypted, then you know, whatever records are on that drive is considered a breach. But if it's encrypted under the safe harbor, you are not required to report that as a breach. And then lastly, the very last tip I'll mention here is that risks are inevitable. Mistakes happen. Also, you get, people who are supposed to be on your network, insiders, so to speak, who are employees, who are, not malicious and just they make a mistake. They send an email to the wrong person. They copy and paste records into the wrong folder, or in the case of malicious employees, they actually steal data. Um, these are hard to these are hard to prevent. It's hard to put a policy in place that will eliminate all of the insider threats. If somebody's account gets compromised and someone's hopping around the network stealing data, that's hard to prevent with perimeter security. So having some sort of alerting in place, specifically behavioral alerting, based on so that every user is monitored and they get baselined and we know what's normal. And then when something changes, if they start acting abnormally, there's some sort of alert that's fired and IT can react and stop the breach before it happens is absolutely critical. And this is really where a lot of security focus is going these days, is sort of assuming that the perimeter will be breached at some point and relying on behavioral analytics to really tell us when something suspicious is going on. All right, so now we can get into the Q&A section. I want to just put up a couple more links, just some things we have, resources. We've got a crash course on HIPAA compliance, which is very similar to this presentation, but goes into a little bit more detail. We've got tons of blog posts on blog.varonis.com tagged with HIPAA in case you're interested. And of course, I will make these slides available to everybody who is interested. And I recommend getting that free audit. We will install our software on your network. It takes about an hour, maybe less. We could do it on site or on WebEx, and then really tell you where you stand. We'll produce a risk analysis report. You can see where sensitive data lives, who's got access, where you might have places to shore up, where you might be really well protected, and it's a really great value for free. So Frank, I'm going to take any questions. I'll pull up the chat room and start reading some of the questions here.
So we have had a few questions come through. One of the earlier ones was just asking you to repeat what HITECH stood for.
Yeah, it looks like a friendly member of our audience in the chat room replied and said Health Information Technology for Economic Clinical Health Act. So thank you, person who answered that for me.
And we also had someone just mention that we forgot to give our Varonis Connect site a shout out, which, Michael, thank you for the reminder. So we do have a customer community. It's at connect.varonis.com. And this is a great place where, Varonis pros can talk to each other. We put up our Tech Talk recordings there, tons of different knowledge-based articles on just how to use the products better. So, please check it out if you haven't. Completely free to join. So Rob, you're
We
saying
might have
you
lost
can't hear
Frank. Now I can hear you.
me?
I'm
Okay.
not sure. Can you hear
So
me all
sorry
right?
about that, guys. Yep, I can hear you fine.
That's okay.
So it sounds like my audio got a little, a little iffy there for a moment. What I was saying was that the Varonis Connect site is our customer community, and it's a great place to talk to other Varonis customers. You can post any questions and get very timely responses. Our Tech Talk recordings go up there. We also have our entire knowledge base, which are just tons of different articles describing, anything from updates, how to accomplish certain goals using our products. I mean, it's vast what the options are and the resources that are available there. And that's at connect.varonis.com. So please go and check it out. It's completely free to sign up. And it's worth mentioning, we also have a little bit of a gamification system going on there. So the more you participate, the more points that you earn, and you can spend them at our Varonis store for any kind of Varonis swag, ranging from like our polo shirts to backpacks. And I believe Cards Against IT should be going up there soon as well.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you, Michael, for mentioning that. This is a great resource when people can talk, especially if you're in healthcare, and I know we have a lot of healthcare customers, and you can kind of put your heads together on HIPAA compliance or regular expressions to detect certain patterns and everything. So it's a good resource. I think there's a couple other questions here.
There was one that was asking you to repeat the 6th rule of HIPAA, or at
Yeah,
least
sure.
there are 6 steps for HIPAA.
Absolutely. So the sixth one was to set up alerts. Assuming that we can't shore up our perimeter to the extent that we will never have a malicious person on the network. So we need to have some sort of alert to tell us when a violation is occurring, when somebody who's not supposed to be accessing HIPAA data has gotten access, or when there's anomalous behavior, such as like thousands and thousands of file opens within a couple of minutes. That would typically mean that somebody's got, some sort of scanning tool or malware or crypto locker, something on there on your network that could be risky. So putting alerts in place on your file servers, on your email servers, and SharePoint, wherever the data lives, is vital. And it can be tricky because a lot of the native auditing subsystems on Windows and Unix and stuff like that, they're very costly. They're performance intensive, and they write to a format that's not easily interpreted. There's not really a place you can aggregate them and search them in an efficient way. And so this is something that Varonis really excels at. We have our own auditing system for most of the platforms that we monitor, and they're very scalable, and they don't write to disk on your production servers. They're really focused on normalizing the data, analyzing it, and really making sure that if there's any risky behavior by any of the users or machines on your network, that we know about it before it becomes a problem. So one of the key ingredients to inside out security.
So Rob, we've gotten a bit of clarification on that question, and the person is saying that they meant the 6th rule of the rules of HIPAA. So I think they're talking about a particular slide, and they said it's the one next to the enforcement rule.
Oh, gotcha. Let's see. Sorry about that. Back here, I think. Oh, yes. I think the administrative, so there was only 5. So the one next to the enforcement rule is the administrative simplification rule. And I blazed through this one. I barely mentioned it. Yeah, this is the one that aims to get all of the medical providers and health plans on the same page as far as how they transact. So get everyone using the same sort of forms and data transfer formats so that not everybody's like all over the place. So it doesn't have much to do with what we're talking about today, but still an important one.
We have one additional question that's in the chat right now, and it's asking, are there recommend Varonis reports to manage HIPAA compliance?
Yeah, so you can run, so there's our classification and priorities report is a great one. That one tells you you can set up the parameters to focus in on HIPAA related data, and then it'll tell you where you have high concentrations of HIPAA data that's open to more people in the company than it should be. So it's kind of like a junction point between sensitivity and risk. That's a good one, a good place to start. We have a lot of Active Directory reports, which focus on activity in Active Directory, group memberships, etc. Those could be helpful when proving to an auditor that you have certain policies in place and that they're only being changed by people who should be changing them. Password policies in the case of like group policy and stuff like that. And one of our systems engineers would probably know more about which specific reports to use than I happen to know. We've got hundreds of them, so I would probably defer to an SE.
And we do have a suggestion to check out report 4B1.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, check that one out myself. And I know we're trying to make a lot more content around our reports. So we just put together some video screencasts around like some of our KPI reports for like executives to, um, and I know we're gonna go through a lot of our different reports to make it clear what they're used for and how to run them, how to customize them, because they're such an important part of our product. Michael had also mentioned the 1A1 report, so you can check that out as well. I'm also going to put up the slide right now before we close out that has the link to the slides, and it is right here. In case anybody's interested in grabbing a PDF version of the slides, this is the bit.ly URL. Also, just paste it in the chat just for simplicity's sake.
Just post it.
All right.
Now, Rob, does anyone need to register to get these slides, or does this link go directly to the PDF?
It should go directly to the PDF. I think it uses a data anywhere link, so it should be perfectly accessible to everybody, unless it's expired, which it might be. I might have set an expiration date. No, I did not. Yeah, so you should be able to grab it right away. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. Oh, more questions?
Rob, one final question. We have a few people saying that it's asking for a user ID password when they follow that bit.ly link.
Okay. I might have to adjust the data anywhere URL. So what I'll do is I'll update it and make sure that it's when you visit it, let's say 30 minutes from now, you won't have that problem.
Another thing that we can do is for anyone that's asked for the recording, I know there have been a few requests. Our new process is we're always going to send the recording to all of our attendees, so you'll definitely get that link. But we can also include the updated bit.ly link in that follow-up that we have with you guys. So we'll make sure we send both the recording and a link to the PDF. And of course, it'll also end up in Connect.
All right, excellent.
All right,
so
great.
Unless there's any further questions, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and I hope you enjoyed and got a lot of value from the presentation. And good luck with your HIPAA compliance initiatives, and yeah, let us know if you want those CPE credits. Contact Frank.
Yes, thank you, everyone. And just as a reminder, if you're looking for those CPE credits, we need to have your ISC squared member number. If you're trying to get a CPE for a certification that's not offered by ISC squared, what we can do is we can send you a confirmation email, basically as proof of attendance, and say that this was worth 1 CPE credit with ISC squared, and then you can make that case on your own to see whether or not you can get that CPE towards a different certification. Thank you all very much. And with any questions, please reply to any of the reminder or confirmation emails associated with this webinar. So thanks again, Rob. Thank you everyone for attending.